I'm going to make some points to support what Richard's already begun on our behalf. And these will be made more in the way that a drunk might use a lamppost in support rather than illumination. However, an early statement from 1932, pre-regulation of the stock market, which FDR managed importantly to begin over here, began with the remarks that it was needed because of shocking disclosures of low standards in high places. This possibly is something that could be applied to the art market, I fear. The stock market in London has a dictum. The dictum is meum dictum pactum. This means my word is my bond. And it is one of the important maxims in the art world, but unfortunately it is not one that necessarily is worth banking upon. I'm going to illustrate 3 reasons why the art market is less ethical than the stock market, for me, holds water. The first is that there is no real regulation. The second, that there is no transparency in the market. And the third, that there are absolutely no barriers to entry. The first, no real regulation. Let me explain by telling you a story against myself. In 1989, 1990, it's a long time ago, I was in short trousers. I had a gallery in London already. I came to New York, on the day of one of the big auctions, and I made a deal with an art dealer here in New York, somebody who's extremely prominent to this day, to buy 8 paintings by the German painter George Baselitz, an artist who I still greatly admire. And I agreed to buy these pictures for $2.4 million, which at the time seemed an extraordinary amount of money to me. I think I was 24 years old at the time. And I left the gallery of this man I'd made the deal with, and I waited, because there was one similar painting that night in auction in New York, and the painting made $800,000. I went to bed that night feeling very clever. The next morning, I got a telephone call from the dealer who told me that the deal did not stand and that he was going to walk away from it. And of course, I was outraged. But under the UCC regulations, anything that is not written on paper and is a transaction above $500 is not enforceable. Clearly here, ethics and the law were not working hand in hand. Ethically, I felt he was doing something that was appalling. Legally, he was absolutely right. He could do it. That illustrates my first point, that there is no real regulation. The second point, that there is no transparency in the market, has been touched upon by Richard in his remarks about the auction houses and the creation of rings. Rings are relatively simple to create. It needs a group of people who stand outside the framework of the auction houses, and they decide to promote an artist. It's very easily done with a young artist, and I can think of one at the moment in the Middle East who is an interesting young painter whose work has rocketed in price from tens of thousands of dollars to hundreds of thousands of dollars in the space of less than 2 years. A group of people bought a lot of pictures. They each owned individually a group of pictures, and they started to put these pictures into auction. They then go to the auctions. They get groups of people to bid them up, and thereby they feather their own nests. And this draws attention of the press. The press pay attention to the artist, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that this artist starts to go up in value, and by a process of osmosis, the ring benefit from the auction house activity that they've begun. This is not transparent to the outside viewer, but to art world professionals, it is quite obvious when this is happening. The last point, and possibly the most important point, is that, unlike the stock market, there are no barriers to entry. To become an art dealer, you need to have a pulse. You need to be able to count, and probably you need 2 eyes in your head. But beyond that, anybody can be and call themselves an art dealer. There was an extraordinary scenario that took place here, predominantly here in New York, with an art dealer called Michael Cohen. Some of you may know about this, but I'm going to use him as an example of an extraordinary situation where he began to trade in commodities and in the stock market and ran into a lot of financial trouble. This was not his business. This is what he was making money doing on the side. But he realized that he could solve his problems where there was an absolute call on his money at 30 days, and he had to deliver, by using other people's paintings as collateral. Some of them he parked even in the auction houses. His level of chutzpah has to be seen to be believed. He actually managed to sell a Titian that was on the wall of the Met. In any case, this gentleman eventually did become unseated, and he has disappeared, last sighted in Brazil. And if anybody can help us out with his whereabouts, Jerry Saltz, our resident investigative journalist, would love to write a story all about it. I use him as an example. There are very clear demands placed upon people who go into the stock market. The stock market is regulated. These individuals are fingerprinted. They are members of a licensed body of people who are allowed to trade. Their backgrounds are heavily investigated before they begin. This is not the case with the art world. And for these three reasons, there is no regulation, no transparency, and no barriers to entry. These are the reasons that I believe absolutely that the art market is less ethical than the stock market cannot be disputed.